Marcos and Tallano wealth makes the Philippines the richest country in the world. The controversial Marcos gold is indeed real. This is the Marcos wealth that some politicians kept on saying is the ill-gotten Marcos wealth. But what is the real story about the controversial gold owned by the Marcos family and the Tallano clan, who were dubbed as the real owner of the Philippines? Marcos and Tallano gold history. During the year 1866 to 1898, Prince Julian MacLeod Tallano, the alleged titleholder of October 10 to 4th in 1864, original certificate of title 01 to 4 protocol. The number 01 refers to the one nation known in pre-Hispanic times as Maharlika. The number 4 refers to the original 4 regions of this nation: 1 Luzon, 2 Visayas, 3 Mindanao, 4 Palawan, has been frequenting the Vatican. In 1934, under Pope Pius XII, the Vatican negotiated with a member of the Filipino royal family, the Christian Tallano clan of the well-known Maharlika. An agreement was reached that 640,000 metric tons of the Tallano gold would be lent to the Pope. This was part of that gold accumulated by the Southeast Asian Srivijayan/Majapahit Empire during its glorious reign of 900 years. In 1939, 2 members of the Tallano family and Roman Catholic priest, Father Jose Antonio Diaz, brought the gold from Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, to the Vatican. After bringing the tons of gold, Father Jose Antonio Diaz went back to Maharlika, Philippines, and resided in Cabanatuan City, Nueva Ecija. After the destructive World War II, Father Diaz facilitated the safe return of the 640,000 metric tons of gold from the Vatican to the Maharlika, Philippines. Former Congressman Manuel Acuna Roxas, relative of the Acuna/Tajian/Tallano clan, and Bishop Enrique Sobrepina Sr., received the gold in Manila in the presence of Attorney Lorenzo Tanada, who later became a senator of the Republic. During the return of the controversial Tallano clan gold, the young lawyer, Attorney Ferdinand E. Marcos, was involved. Certainly by all accounts it was Ferdinand Marcos and Father Diaz were the 2 persons who shared in the enormous 30% commission, that is 192,000 tons of gold worth around $4 trillion during the year 2006, for handling the transaction. No truth that the Marcos wealth was ill-gotten. According to a lease agreement made between the Tallano clan and the Maharlika government, a total of 640,000 metric tons of gold was deposited in the newly installed Central Bank of the Maharlika to comply with its requirement for gold reserve. Under the terms of the contract, the Central Bank of the Philippines became the holder of that gold. The lease agreement between the Tallano clan and the Philippine government expired during the year 2005. The Tallano Foundation has given notice of the termination of this 50-year lease following the additional 5-year discretionary period on December 31, 2005, but remains unable to obtain an inventory of this asset even though the central bank, now Bangko Sentral Pilipinas, is no longer entitled to hold the gold. Having gained the trust and confidence of Father Diaz, the Tallano clan made him the main negotiator and trustee of their gold. Father Diaz in turn hired the services of Attorney Ferdinand E. Marcos, then a recommended brilliant young lawyer, having attained notoriety when he successfully defended himself in the Nalandasan case in 1939. The Tallano clan paid commission to Father Diaz and Attorney Marcos in gold, 30% from the principal of 640,000 metric tons. In 1949, the 2 richest men in the world were Father Jose Antonio Diaz and Attorney Ferdinand E. Marcos. Between the 2 of them they legitimately earned and owned 192,000 metric tons of gold from Tallano clan and Maharlika government. Ferdinand Marcos withdrew their share of the gold from the central bank and minted it RPCB. Sometime later, Father Diaz and Marcos brought their gold to Switzerland, in the Swiss Bank Corporation in Zurich. The remaining 400,000 metric tons of Tallano gold, Prince Lakan Acuna MacLeod Tallano, son of Raja Solomon Tajian and grandson of Maharaja Luisong Tajian, is in the 3rd-floor basement of the Central Bank Minting Plant in East Avenue, Quezon City. There are 950,000 metric tons of gold, declared missing in the International Court of Justice, picked up by Yamashita from its European ally, Hitler. Unexplained losses for the controversial Tallano and Maharlika gold. The Tajian Tallano gold started at 720,000 tons. 640,000 tons were transported to the Vatican and back, leaving 80,000 tons unaccounted from the outset. Out of 640,000 tons, 192,000 tons were paid in commission, which should leave 448,000 tons, but somehow that number has become 400,000 tons, leaving another 48,000 tons unaccounted. Following this story, there are 128,000, 80,000 plus 48,000 tons of gold which somehow slipped through the cracks, in addition to 192,000 earned in commission, whereabouts unknown. Out of the remaining 400,000 tons, we do not know how much remains. We know there was an effort to do a major disappearing act when the old central bank morphed into the new Banco Central Pilipinas, but a recent decision of the Supreme Court, Banco Filipino versus BSP, has upheld that BSP is responsible for the liabilities of the old central bank. The point is that ultimately, a complete accounting should show where all of the original 720,000 tons went, not to mention estimated 1.2 million tons of Yamashita treasure, combined German and Japanese plunder, identified above, that is very nearly 2 million tons of gold worth more than $38 trillion at today's price. 2006. The phony, CIA-backed EDSA People Power exhibition of 1986 had one primary purpose, and it was to take this vast quantity of gold from the Philippines and the Filipino people for the benefit of the international banking cartel to enslave mankind. What about Father Diaz's commission shared with Ferdinand Marcos? When Father Jose Antonio Diaz died in 1974, all the 30% commission in gold became the legendary Marcos Gold. After providing for his family in Marcos' letter of instruction, the whole wealth derived from this was supposed to be given to the Filipino people. This was the Marcos wealth that some politician and churchman kept on saying was the ill-gotten Marcos wealth. Why this wealth has been labeled ill-gotten a little further along in our study, that until today is in Marcos' secret accounts. On April 9, 1973, Marcos said, "My earthly goods have been placed in the custody and for the disposition of the Marcos Foundation dedicated to the welfare of the Filipino people." In his grand plan, Marcos wanted to re-establish the former grandeur of Maharlika and the whole region of Southeast Asia, the former Malayan Empire. In June 1983, Marcos appeared before the first world leaders in Toronto. He announced his plan to boost economy of the Southeast Asia region by creating Asian dollar. This would be backed up by the 400,000 metric tons of gold in central bank. The Asian dollar, backed up by the 2/3 of all gold in the world that was in the Maharlika, would make the Maharlika money more valuable and stronger than the American dollar. This was his vision, to raise Southeast Asia to be par with the rest of the first world countries. There is plenty of solid evidence of a program Marcos worked on with American President Ronald Reagan, which referred to as the ABL-ANG Bagong Lipunan program. Under this program, some 250 sets of gold, documentation and related ABL currency were to be shipped to various countries around the world. What became of the remaining 400,000 metric tons pertaining to the Tajian, Tallano clan, and where is it today? To this day, the 400,000 metric tons of gold are still in the central bank in East Avenue, Quezon City. Nobody can move it because Marcos insured it with the Lloyds of London and its agents are guarding it. But the present government does not acknowledge its existence. Not only have successive governments of the Philippines failed to acknowledge the existence of the gold, they have conspired to keep this information from being known to the Filipino people. We assume this is because they have been working at ways to convert the gold for their own selfish gain, probably in conspiracy with the international banking cartel. Immediately after Ferdinand Marcos was removed from the office by a U.S. military helicopter, the newly installed President Corazon Aquino formed the PCGG Presidential Commission on Good Government, purportedly to go after the Marcos ill-gotten wealth. It was very important to the conspirators that this wealth should be labeled ill-gotten, even though, as has already been shown, Mr. Marcos was in his own right the wealthiest man on the face of the earth and had absolutely no need to take anything from anyone. A decision of the Federal Supreme Court of Switzerland dated December 21, 1990 said, by decision of May 29, 1986, the Attorney General of District of Zurich accepted in principle to the legal assistance requested by the Philippines and invited all the banks of the city of Zurich to freeze immediately all the accounts, deposits or safes of the persons, companies or foundations of Marcos, in the order. The accounts were frozen at the request of the government of the Philippines, and the PCGG has ensured they have remained frozen to this day. This is all a grand scheme or scam. Blinded Filipinos must keep repeating that Marcos was a thief, magnanikaw, so that those hundreds of billions of dollars of Marcos money will remain frozen and not be given to them for their use. Consequently, they must constantly borrow money from International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank, WB, with so much interest so that this country will remain a slave and shackled to the foreign powers. History will show that the money was not stashed away and inaccessible but available to truly deserving Filipinos. There was nothing secret about Marcos' accounts. These accounts were only made secret by some people in the government so that the public would not know its real story. Gold for gold, dollar for dollar, this country, the Maharlika, is the richest country in the world. During a talk show in U.S. TV the week following the bombing of the New York Twin Towers, President Bush was asked this question: which is the richest country in the world today? With a smile he said, the Philippines. Marcos knew it, but he could not talk. At the time they made sure that Marcos would not longer talk. After kidnapping him from Malacanang, They put him in a golden prison in Hawaii. The Tallano gold fraud. As we have seen, not a single document supports the Tallano claims which underpin its claims to own the Philippines, except the Marcos-ruled parts. Each one has proven a deliberate and anachronistic fraud, or simply does not support the Tallano claims in any way. So far, this is simply a real estate scam which the Tallanos used to get money out of people for property they did not own. More recently, the Tallanos have used their fraudulent documents to explain documents to support their contention that Ferdinand Marcos made his vast fortunes from a gold deal between the Tallanos and the Vatican rather than from thieving the national treasury of the Philippines and, in doing so, destroying the nation's economy. Tallano proponents have carefully avoided validating their documents through a forensic document examiner nor a historian familiar with the period. Until they choose to submit their documents to such examination, there is no cause to accept their presentations related to the Vatican borrowing money as any more truthful than any other document they have presented. So, all that is left is to establish whether it is reasonable that the Tallanos possess 720,000 tons of gold, of which they loaned 640,000 tons to the Vatican so that Hitler could finance World War II. They do not explain why the Vatican should borrow the gold, how the gold was transported, nor any rational reason why Hitler should have been given anything by the Vatican. To understand the enormity of this amount of gold, consider the vaults of the Bank of England, which contain about 20% of the world's gold bullion on behalf of several governments, some 5,000 tons worth in the region of $250 billion. Is it reasonable that the Tallanos possess 140 times the gold in the Bank of England, 28 times more gold than held in bullion worldwide? The second issue is the pure weight of the gold. Where in the Philippines could such an amount be stored? Manila's soggy substrate is unlikely to be able to handle that concentration of weight in a small space. A third issue is that transferring that amount of gold would have taken a fleet of the largest cargo vessels of the largest capacity of the time, under massive armed guard, to the other side of the world, without anyone noticing. Fifth, the gold would only have been helpful if Hitler could monetize it so he could actually spend the money. Something he could hardly have done with no one knowing. So how did Hitler's Germany finance its war? Well, by a build policy based on borrowing and by coincidence, launched a war when the loans became due which enabled it to expropriate the infrastructure. Hitler also co-opted the wealthy elite and made them even richer. He did not need to borrow from the Vatican or anyone else. So, is it likely that Marcos made his fortune by being the go-between in a deal that involved non-existent gold in a non-existent deal using non-existent gold owned by a non-existent Philippine monarchy? It is clearly drivel,